Afternoon, everybody. And coming back to the Civil War, we're going to be discussing today how things were about 155 years ago at this time. It's September 1863, and things had not been going well for the Confederacy. Things went very well for them in 1861 and 1862, but up to this point, 1863 had not been good to the Confederacy. Let's look at it. Over the last couple of months, they lost Vicksburg. They lost Gettysburg. They lost Port Hudson, also on the Mississippi. Things were not going well. They did not have any major victories in a while. Granted, they had Chancellorsville in May, but since then, that was also bittersweet because they lost Stonewall Jackson. So they've had one tragic event after the next. And what tends to happen when things go bad? A lot of people start looking for someone to blame. And some of the people in the South wasted no time looking for someone to blame. Guess who took most of the heat? The president, kind of the way it does now. President Davis took a lot of heat for everything. A lot of people calling for his impeachment, saying, oh, if we had a better leader, this wouldn't happen. Let's get rid of this, let's get rid of that, get rid of him. And things got so out of hand in the South that the North made an interesting comment that they didn't actually really need an effective spy network in the South because the South told them everything they wanted to know. What that means is you had Southern newspapers and politicians telling detail for detail everything someone else was doing just to show them up. The North knew through Southern newspapers where the troops were going, what they were doing, what was going on here, what was going on there. Completely shot themselves in the foot. Meanwhile, Davis is trying to keep order. I mean, Lincoln had his fair share of people trying to undermine him as well and say how bad he was as well. Difference is Lincoln, for the executive branch position, was considerably stronger in the North than it was in the South, and he was able to get things done and make some strong decisions without some of the people beneath him. Whereas Davis, he was in a worse situation in that, you know, the South seceded based on states' rights. The states wanted to have the full rights and the federal government had almost none. So he couldn't tell the states in the South what to do. He couldn't make executive orders. He couldn't do he could make suggestions, and it was left for the states to argue it amongst themselves and decide if they were going to do it or decide to help. Perfect example, most of Virginia was starving in Tennessee were starving because of the ravages from the army and the war going on in that area. But an interesting thing is when in Georgia, Sherman was noticed this especially when he goes down there the following year, that Georgia has more food than they can possibly eat. And everyone's happy, everyone's comfortable, and they desperately needed those supplies in Northern Virginia to help the rest of the Southern Army. But the state of Georgia, for example, said, no, we've already given our part. The president did not have any power to control the supplies in the country. They didn't work together. Everyone's like, I will do it if I feel like it kind of attitude. There was some communal attitude, but there wasn't enough to make it work. So that's some of the problems that President Davis was facing at that time. And you had General Lee looking to tender his resignation, which that didn't help matters. And so another thing was going on around this time was they saw that they didn't have much initiative in the East, but they hoped that they could strike a blow out in the West, out in the Tennessee area. And so the idea was that they could mass their armies in the Tennessee area, and one of those armies actually would be groups would be by General James Longstreet. What happened there was Longstreet had always wanted his own independent command, not to where he was ready to go around Lee or anything, but he wanted his own independent command. And so he actually pulled some strings to see about getting his part of the army detached from the Army of Northern Virginia and sent over to the Army of Tennessee so he can help out the theater out there. Initially, Davis asked Lee to take the army and go over to Tennessee to help stomp out the situation out that way, and Lee all but refused, basically reminding the president that his job was to defend Virginia first and foremost. You know, nothing against Tennessee, but the whole reason he was in this mess in the first place was to defend Virginia. And so he basically told the president, I'm not going to do it, without saying it directly. Lee had a good way with words. But Longstreet wanted to go. So he had friends of his in the Congress pull strings with President Davis to get his part of the army detached, him with Hood's and McLaws division, because Pickett's division was still pretty much destroyed after Gettysburg. and they managed to make their way all the way over to eastern Tennessee. More on that to come.